you mentioned earlier how President Obama was violating the JCPOA, the so-called Iran nuclear deal, and we all know how President Trump withdrew from the JCPOA. There's questions in the chat about do you have any thoughts or any comments about any ongoing or future potential negotiations between Iran and the US? And also, I wonder how can Iran trust the US after the United States behaved so dishonestly?
Iran can't trust the United States at all. And I would add to what Obama did with regards to Iran, imposing maximum pressure sanctions that were targeting ordinary people and violating the nuclear deal that he later signed. I would add to that the destruction of Libya, the genocide in Yemen, because that began uh, during his period in the White House, and it was with his green light that the Saudis and the Emiratis and Qatar back then, Al Jazeera and Qatar were fully supporting the genocide in Gaza. So and of course we saw the dirty war in Syria initiated by Obama, and Operation Timber Sycamore was something that he signed onto. So different administrations in the United States have basically destroyed our region, and therefore Iran will never be able to trust the United States. And in the past, whenever we have negotiated with the United States betrayed us. They every time we held out our hand, the United States slapped that hand, to say the least. And during the nuclear deal, Iran uh, lived up to its obligations, and Obama violated the deal. And then Trump, of course, tore up the deal. Before that, we had in the 1990s, the Iranians agreed to give Conoco, an oil company, an oil field in the Persian Gulf. The then president of Iran, Hashemi Rafsanjani, said that this was a green light in an interview. He said that this was a green light to the United States. And after 2 years of negotiations, as the deal was about to be signed, Congress passed a law sanctioning Iranian oil and gas. And the United States government supported that. Later, the United States also during the Reagan period had a number of hostages in Lebanon. This was before Hezbollah was created. The United States and Reagan asked Iran to help free those hostages. The Iranians went to Lebanon, used their influence, paid money to different people, and got these people released. But in return, the United States again antagonized Iran. The United States downed an Iranian airliner, killing 290 people. It never apologized. The United States, in fact, lied about the circumstances until it came out years later in a Newsweek article. Of course, the Iranians had given that material, had given the evidence back at the time of the downing of the airliner, but Western media wasn't interested. Just like it is never interested when it's not, today, when it's not in the interests of the governments in the West. We're now hearing, for example, during hearings in the United States, that the United States has been carrying out Operation Timber Sycamore in Syria. This should have been discussed 13 years ago, but only now that Al Qaeda is in Syria, we are hearing this being discussed uh, in government circles, and still the media is not showing interest because the deep state of the United States has been supporting that policy. But in any case, whenever the Iranians tried to cooperate with the United States, tried to diffuse tensions, the United States mistakenly saw that as a sign of Iranian weakness. And that makes negotiating with the United States even more difficult. Because if the United States tries to negotiate with Iran, and for whatever reason Iran agrees to negotiations, instead of using this as an opportunity to resolve the some of the issues that exist between the two sides. Many in the United States will once again interpret this as a sign of weakness. So it's very difficult to work with Americans, especially since after they negotiate deals, they violate them. The Russians also have experience with that. The Minsk Accords. Um, the West never intended to implement the Minsk Accords over Ukraine. We later saw the former Chancellor of Germany say that the intention was never to implement the Minsk Accords, it was to buy time. Merkel said that just I think a year and a half ago. Then Hollande, the president of France, he repeated the same thing in a different interview. And of course, the former president of Ukraine said this as well. So the Western powers, Western governments, they expect other countries to abide by international law, but they see themselves as above international law. They see themselves as uh, having exceptional rights. So if they sign an agreement, the other side must abide by its obligations, but since they have special privileges, they can violate them whenever they want. And that makes doing a deal extremely difficult, if not impossible.